Thank you, Betty. Thank you all for taking the time out to join us here this evening. And I also want to extend my congratulations to Oregon State CCLP program for its 20-year anniversary, and as was noted, it's in cohort 10. And I want to thank you for the invitation to be the 8th Charles Carpenter lecturer. I have to say I've had a little bit of queasiness about the term of lecturer. It's never crossed my particular calendar before, so I think long and hard about what I might share with you this evening. But the Charles Carpenter lecture does have special meaning, and Doreen mentioned that Dr. Carpenter and my late father were students together back in 1970, a very long time ago, at the University of Texas at Austin in the CCLP program. And my father spoke very fondly of Dr. Carpenter, of his leadership and his commitment to scholarship and to students. So you can well imagine that this evening has some very special meaning for me in lots of different ways. As an alumnus of cohort 10, as of 2001, it seems like a very long time ago now, I can empathize with you who are current students. It likely feels like every waking moment you're thinking about your question or how to communicate your research in that 30-second elevator speech. And particularly if you're a second-year research student, you're really trying to hone in on those fast facts that not just your major professor, but others want to make sure you're focused. And it may sound strange, but I would ask you to stop and relish these moments because they will all too soon be behind you. They're sweet memories, hard memories, but sweet. And I have often said that I would not have finished and I would be ABD without the friendship and support that I received from my cohort members. The Oregon State cohort model really worked for me. I needed the insight from the professors, and I needed the different perspectives that I got from my cohort. Now, I had a small cohort. We started with 16. We were down to 10 really quick, and we only had one man, the poor guy. But he held his own, and we were kind to him, 9 women. But I do think that the experience of my cohort broadened my thinking. And I have to say, it really helped me relearn how to learn. And I hope some of that is happening to you. The 2 years of coursework was very intense, but it was a time for reflection, and it clearly was some of the best professional and personal development I have ever experienced. And no successful doctoral student gets through without the gentle guiding hand of the major professor. As you know, my major professor was Dr. Duval, and that gentle hand was there until she neared retirement. Now, I was 6 years in to my ABD-ness, and she did her best to keep her foot solidly planted on my butt. Sincere thanks to Betty, because I know that without that, I would not have finished. So thank you. My topic this evening is not about what my job is. It is not about the governor's plan for education, except briefly. It's not about the Oregon Education Investment Board and the czar that's going to run all of education and early learning. My topic this evening is about leadership lessons that I have learned in my 20-plus years in public service. Some of the lessons I've learned and relearned, likely because they're important. And they're important to me as a servant leader. Many of these lessons won't be new to you. They'll sound maybe even trite. You may have heard them all before. However, as a community college and university leader, it's important to take a moment, I believe, to reflect on who we are, what's important to us, and how our everyday actions confirm our core values. So in the announcement, it said that I was going to do these lessons in 140 characters or less, and I did. That's just the titles I did, not the whole of it. So you're not out of here yet. So the first leadership lesson is really about personal core values, and that's 18 characters, and I am keeping track. I challenge you to evaluate your own personal values, those of responsibility, fairness, respect, and trust, to yourself, your friends, your community, and your professional colleagues. Are you trusted? Trustworthiness leads to someone who is dependable. In a time of challenge, can you be counted on by others? Do you do what you say you will do when you say you will do it? Nothing, and I repeat nothing, is more important in life and leadership than your word as your bond. Without the trust and respect that comes from being a person of your word, you will find your effectiveness hampered and doors closed to you. This is especially true in public policy arenas such as the legislature. Mark will nod, having been someone who worked with the legislature. Elected officials come to Salem to serve their constituents and the whole of Oregon. They expect and deserve our respect, regardless of their ideology or their party affiliation. Candidly, it's not always easy. But it is essential if you're going to have a relationship with an elected leader that lasts session after session. Building and maintaining rapport based on mutual respect is important. And it's not just about getting a good budget or getting a critical bill. But when you need the assistance of someone, they are there to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Leaders that come to mind for me who knew and held their core values was U.S. Senator Gordon Smith, Dave Frohnmeyer, past president of the University of Oregon and Oregon's Attorney General, Norma Paulus, elected leader and elected superintendent of public instruction, Senator Frank Roberts, Kate Brown, the current Secretary of State. When faced with challenges or adversity, it might be easier, or in some ways expeditious, to sway from one's core values. But every morning, the mirror will remind you of what you did. Second leadership lesson, vision and focus, 14 characters. Think of leaders from your life experiences, the people you personally know who have exhibited the leadership skill of focus. Among leaders with vision and focus for me were Abraham Lincoln, General George Patton, Martin Luther King, Barbara Jordan, Margaret Thatcher. All of these leaders rose to their own personal and political challenge and defined a pathway for the betterment of people and people's lives. Leaders have vision and focus. They are tenacious and courageous. Look within yourselves for those characteristics that are exhibited by those world leaders I mentioned. So a reflection on a vision and focused leader. Early on as commissioner, I learned firsthand about this. Not on my own, not for myself, but from a board member. And I work for the State Board of Education. The 7 members are appointed by the governor and serve at his pleasure. So essentially, this was one of my bosses. This state board member was elected and served on a local school board. He was then elected and served on a local community college board. And then he was tapped by the governor to serve on the State Board of Education. You could say he knew the ropes about being a board member. Dr. Feller, he was a dentist by profession, was also a tireless advocate for equalizing the funding for all Oregon's community college students, no matter their particular geography. I'm not going to bore you with how that came to be. It is in my dissertation. This is not a policy that affected him personally or directly. It was a matter of what was fair and right. It took a little more than 5 years for Dr. Feller to move the rest of the board to have the conversation and to come around to his way of thinking, and then another year or 2 to gain consensus among local college leadership. Equalizing meant that some colleges were going to gain and some were going to lose. But no one could argue with the vision of equal support for community college students. Well, except the 3 colleges that sued. They didn't agree, and they did file a suit. And they filed suit against the board and the commissioner to stop the board from moving the policy forward. Because you won't be surprised, they were colleges that were going to lose resources. And they had lots of good arguments about why what we were contemplating was unfair. The board prevailed in court and on appeal. Dr. Feller taught us all a lesson in focus and tenacity, and in so doing brought fairness to all Oregon Community College students. Leadership lesson number 3, the art of compromise. 18 characters. Collaboration and cooperation are often called the unnatural act between 2 consenting entities. Don't come to it naturally. However unnatural, it is a critical skill for leaders today. Unfortunately, it seems to me that our congressional leaders find more things to disagree about and more ways in which to disagree than they are able to find common ground. In compromise, you may not have gotten everything you wanted, but you got far enough to claim an incremental success. This leadership lesson ties nicely with vision and focus. If you think about it as the civil rights movement, it really started back in 1776, if not before that, and we're still working on it. This is incremental success. And by golly, yes, I'd say it's too slow. But we can acknowledge that things are better today, but civil rights has not yet been fully realized in this country. Now, the next example of the art of compromise is not, I had a word, I'm sorry, I just lost it. But my example is the current governor, Governor Kitzhaber. He is someone to me that exemplifies a leader who knows the art of compromise. And you may have heard that today there was a big announcement. The governor was back in DC most of the week. He was negotiating with several different federal agencies, but particularly Medicare, the Center for Medicaid, and other aid, to underwrite Oregon's healthcare legislation to the tune of $1.9 billion. 1.9. Now, if he hadn't been able to get it, much of the legislation that's passed in the last several years was at risk. So we had a lot at stake. Now, I think he was after $5 billion. So he came home with 1.9. He probably won't hold that against him. But his ability to see the landscape and to find that incremental piece of success that moves the agenda forward is an art that I wish I had. It was a skill I wish I had more of. Now, Kitzhaber has a long history of seeking system change. Some of you may know, may not have been in Oregon, but he has tenacity and skill in finding that common ground without sacrificing his core values. In the 90s, he did something that we refer to as the Oregon Health Plan. The first time a state had said, we don't want to follow your dictate, federal government, we want our own menu, and we want to decide what we can afford and what we can't afford. And then about the middle 90s or late 90s, he was the sponsor of the Oregon Plan for salmon, which essentially kept salmon in Oregon and in Oregon streams off the endangered species list. And now, in his unprecedented third term, the Oregon Education Investment Board and its activities. All of these efforts aren't just about moves on a chess game, but they come from a deep sense of social justice, of equal access and opportunity for all Oregonians. Fourth leadership lesson, don't give up. 16 characters. From climbing out of bed each morning to dealing with an emergency, our response to these situations defines our values of responsibility and dependability. The ability to get tossed down, pick yourself up and go at it again, for me is not just about being stubborn, because I am, but it's also about self-discipline and self-control. Think before you act. Consider the consequences of your words, your actions, and your attitude. Even when you think no one is watching, they are. And your attitude toward your work and your colleagues speaks volumes about who you really are. Be responsible for your own actions and respect others' reputations. A current community college president embodies what I believe is don't give up. Dr. Patty Scott is president of Southwestern Oregon Community College. And she may have experienced more than the average number of down and back up. You see, Patty was happily a student services professional at her college. Had been there at least 15 years, working her way up. She's very happy. She loves student services. She loves interacting with students. And about 5 years ago, her community college and her college leadership fractured. The college board looked around for a stabilizing and a caring leader to bring the college community back together. And it chose Patty. To say she was overwhelmed by the responsibilities of this new job is an understatement. But she knew her strengths and she used them. She knew her first priority was to bring the staff together to develop a shared vision. And at the same time, because of what had happened with the previous leadership and their decisions, she also had to immediately begin reducing staff. By all accounts, and her own many sleepless nights, worried about staff morale and making payroll, Patty's steady leadership and caring heart rebuilt that college community. Now, at the same time she was doing that, she also had me leaning on her because they'd been given some resources from the legislature to build a facility in Curry County. And the money had been spent on something else. So I'm leaning on her. She doesn't have the money. She has to cut the budget. She has to rebuild. I'm happy to say she did fulfill that promise to Curry County. She did lead a successful capital campaign. It was an honor to be included in the ribbon cutting of the new Curry County campus last fall, where Patty, just like her, gave credit to everyone else for not giving up. Leadership lesson number 5, don't let others define you. 24 characters. Define yourself as a leader and professional through your own actions. This shows in how you deal ethical stride and face the challenges before you. Where others may want to define you by any number of labels, by your dress, race, sex. It's up to you, and it's up to each of us to be true to ourselves. Resist labels for yourself and others. Be understanding of others and their perceptions and their differences. Tell your own truth. Lead from your head and your heart. There are any number of inspirational leaders who come to mind who have triumphed by being their own person. My favorite here is Governor Barbara Roberts. She's also in the dissertation. She was Oregon's first and only woman governor, and she certainly didn't start out her life with a silver spoon. She married young before finishing high school. She had 2 boys and worked to support her husband while he went to college. The marriage ended. Barbara continued to work, but she also got involved in her community and in her local school district. You see, one of her sons had special needs, and he wasn't getting the kind of support that she thought he needed. So she became involved. This led to election of the school board. Then next came election to the community college board. That would be Mount Hood. Then she was president of the Oregon Community College Association, which is the association of the 17 colleges. Then an election to the Oregon House of Representatives, then Secretary of State, and then governor. Governor Roberts guided Oregon through a very difficult revenue time, and opinions varied about her performance. But she says, in her own words, she said, "I think I did as well as anyone could have, given the situation, given the landscape." She says it was her unerring love for Oregon and its citizens that supported her during those turbulent years. I believe it was her grace and her dignity and her knowledge of who she was. Another leader, and this is a fun one, that resisted others' definitions is OSU's baseball coach, Pat Casey. I just love this story. Okay, I'm not a serious fan of any kind of sport, I have to tell you. But Coach Casey is now clearly a winner. 18 seasons he's been with OSU. He's guided the team to 41 wins. He's been named Coach of the Year in the Pac-10 3 different times. I shouldn't say 3 years in a row because I don't believe that's right. And he's taken the team to 2 national championships. I dare say there were some lean years that only he had that vision. Only he was defining himself and his team as a winner, not a loser. But Coach Casey resisted that label, and he continues to lead a winning OSU baseball team. 6th leadership lesson, balance. 7 characters. No one can be on point endlessly. Leaders have spurts that work really hard for weeks or months on end, but we need a break. And that's not a bad thing. Our professional career often takes a big time commitment. Not unlike graduate school and writing a dissertation. But it's important to find balance in work and play it's important to find balance. And it's good to take a rest and allow others to step up. The imagery I have here, and a few of you in the room know that I'm married to a fish and wildlife guy. And I was looking for the imagery here to help to me. Think about a flock of geese and that V that they form. Do you know that goose that's in the center of the V flies for only about 15 minutes? And those geese are talking all the time to one another. How you doing up there? You all right? You all right? You make it? Are you ready to get back? And then it seems almost effortlessly. The one in the on point slides back, somebody slides in. Imagine if they didn't talk, what a mess that would be. So they also are great communicators. So not only do they know how to keep balance, they are great communicators. Just like the geese, we need to allow for recharging and for reflection. My role model here on balance is Dr. Mary Spielberg. Mary is president at Lane Community College here in Oregon, and we have known each other for 20 plus years. Back when she was Dean of Workforce of something or other at Lynn Benton Community College. Some of you may recognize her name. She was the immediate past president of the American Association of Community Colleges. She's a nationally recognized leader in sustainability and learning communities. She travels the globe to speak on community college issues. She was, in fact, a Charles Carpenter lecturer, so I feel like I'm in very good company. I figure she probably has as many airline miles as President Obama. Along the way, Mary's commitment to community college and students, or along with it, is her commitment to her own life balance. In order to be out there on that point, as much as she is, she needs time to recharge. She makes time to read and to have a cup of tea and to contemplate poetry and art, to get a massage. She gives so much of herself to her communities, but she saves some for herself. She is committed to a life well lived. 7th leadership lesson, don't be a jerk. 11 characters. You see this, there's a euphemism for this on a lot of bumper stickers anymore. Wag more, bar less. But it was Nan Poppy, campus president at PCC, who I'm stealing this "don't be a jerk" phrase from, because it just really hits home for me. It's the golden rule. Treat others as you would wish to be treated. Leadership means being compassionate, understanding, listening hard. Try not to peek at your iPhone while you're having a conversation with someone. Just try to go all the way through that conversation without, "Hey, I'm listening." No. Give credit. Be fair. Be forgiving. Work to see another person's point of view. Value different perspectives. Defend your opponent's right to differ. Maintain decorum. Don't take yourself too seriously. Give others power. Got some lofty ones that I think fill the "don't be a jerk" category. Mother Teresa. Martin Luther King. Closer to home, late former governor and Senator Mark Hatfield is a compassionate leader. Those who knew him speak of how generous and gracious he was with his time. He had a skill of engaging you in a conversation and really being in that conversation, even if there were 100 constituents waiting for his time. Over the years in the U.S. Senate, Mark Hatfield accumulated considerable influence and appropriation power. But what he was known for was being humble and fair. As leaders in these challenging times for post-secondary education, we need to use all of these lessons and many more if we are to move our institutions and our students toward better learning and community outcomes. This challenge was brought into sharp relief to me when I read yesterday's Chronicle. There's an article there by Richard Cullenberg, who was writing about the report that has just been issued by AACC, titled "Reclaiming the American Dream, Community Colleges and the Nation's Future." Have you heard the buzz about this? Yeah. Some nods. Cullenberg quotes the report in part, and this is in quotes. "What we find today in community colleges are student success rates that are unacceptably low, employment preparation that is inadequately connected to the job market needs, and disconnects in transitions between high schools, community colleges, and baccalaureate institutions." The report continues. Developmental education as traditionally practiced is dysfunctional. That barriers to transfer inhibit student progress, that degree and certificate rates are too low, and that attainment gaps across groups of students is unacceptably wide. I admit that I winced more than once at the truth in these words. But as I said, it brought into focus what I believe is part of the values conflict that we currently have in community colleges. The values that are potentially in conflict, from my viewpoint, are access and completion. With the emphasis on timely completion as we push people to finish, will we become more selective and choose to put at risk the very heart of the community college mission, which is universal access? As more and more young, what I call traditionally aged students come to Oregon's community colleges, one of the things I do is collect a lot of data and talk about it to policymakers. And our lower division transfer course taking rate has gone up 10% in the last 5 years. Younger students are coming to community colleges to get transfer credits to move on. I think that's fine. But there is a growing concern among community college leaders that we're going to become primarily junior colleges. It's a mission that's embedded in our hearts. These conflicts don't lend themselves to easy solutions or quick fixes, but we need to start thinking about how we as leaders can think creatively on how to address them. And we don't have the choice to avoid the issue, because ultimately it is all about the students and their success. Every year, I have the honor to attend and recognize the 2 top outstanding student scholars in each of the 17 community colleges. It's a great affair. They all come to the Capitol. We feed them lunch. They give us speeches. Then we go meet the governor, and the governor recognizes them. It's a great event. It's one of those sort of drill your feet back into the ground about why you do the work you do. There's a great diversity every year in the age and situation of these scholars. Some are single parents, working parents, many non-traditional students. This year, the age range was 17 to 55. They are proud. Many bring their children and their families with them to this event. They believe that education is the pathway to a better life for themselves and for their family. They dream they can change the world. This annual event cements in me, and likely everyone else who attends, a renewed commitment to do all we can, to do our very best to ensure that students who start succeed and achieve their goals. And it will take our collective leadership skills to change the world, because we believe, just like our students, that we can change the world. Thanks very much.